Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome again. My name is Cui Fen, a student from the Faculty of Arts and Social Science. Thank you for being a part of You Alive. Today's program will be split up into 3 portions. The first will be a 10-minute talk by our speaker, Mr. Tan Bee Thiam, followed by a 20-minute interview with Mr. Sivan, the chairman of our You Alive organizing committee. Finally, we will be having a 30-minute Q&A session. If you wish to ask a question, do kindly proceed to the microphones located along the sides, introduce yourself and speak into them directly. This is important so that the online community is able to hear your question clearly. Once again, we apologize for the delay and please do kindly sit back and enjoy. Thank you.
Alive.
Only when you know life, I think, can you put life, into your film. It is an important part of us knowing what is the world outside, knowing what film means to other people. It allows you to see beyond yourself, to see what other people, are experiencing and what matters to them. Because if not, your film becomes, just about yourself. It becomes just about your own world, and you miss, the kind of richness that other people are creating. I think that sharing platform is important, and it helps us, I think, hopefully, to become better filmmakers, or if not, filmmakers that are making works that matter to other people. As well as, I think, just providing an environment and platform for us to not be afraid to try new ideas, forge critical dialogue with other film practitioners. We show them our films, we ask to see what they have made as well, and we tell each other, why do we make the films that we do. In the last 5 years especially, we find more and more young people, as well as people who care, that they are actively archiving, documenting the films that they have seen before. They have like a blog, that tells you what they feel about these films. And I think that process of archiving, of documenting, is interesting to me. In fact, it is more interesting to me than the films itself. Why is it that they have such a compulsive desire to record and to share this library of films with other people? Because these films talks to them and they want other people to watch it. Because it is not just history, it is history alive.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Tan Bee Thiam.
A very good evening to everyone. Thank you for having me back. I have very fond memories of NUS because this is where I started to make my first short films. I remember during that time it was the Center for the Arts under Professor Edwin Tambu, and it just started New Studios, which is a filmmaking society. During that time we have nothing, so we have to build everything up from scratch. We have to buy the cameras, we have to set up the editing suites, buy the RAMs, even come up with our own training sessions. What is it that we want to do? What are the films that we want? Who are the trainers that we want to come in to help us train? Because we are all not trained. So it was a very exciting time. And I remember one of the first short films that I've made with the studio is Cyrus. Cyrus is a friend. He is a Filipino student who was invited by the Singapore International Foundation to spend a semester in NUS in 2002. He came, he had a great time. It was a group of almost 50 fellows from Southeast Asia who spent a semester in NUS. He went back, but he fell very ill. And a group of us decided to fundraise for him, to try to defray his medical costs. And of course, the team asked me to come up with a video. So when he was back in Singapore to receive treatment, one of the things that I was tasked to do was to follow him for 24 hours, day and night, and to make a video. Because not everybody can make it for the fundraising event. So we thought maybe the video might help to tell his story and to get more people to donate. That was my first experience of the impact a film had. The film was shown during the fundraising event. We raised some money for him. But what was most moving for me was towards the end of 24 hours, almost past midnight, and I asked him, what are some of the things that you want to tell other people? So I kept the camera rolling, and he went on to thank almost all the people that he has met in Singapore. It was a very long take of almost 15 minutes. He did not miss out anybody. It was done in one take. And that was Cyrus 2002, one of the first short films that I've made. When he passed away, it was a video that I sent to his family, and that was how we remember him by. That was my first experience of what a movie can do, what are the power of an image, and when things passed, what is the value of that image left for the people behind. After I graduated, I went on a backpacking trip to India, and that was when I chanced upon a film festival. I met filmmakers from the region, Yulwe Hajisari, the first Malaysian filmmaker who went to Cannes. I met Tsai Ming Liang, Malaysian-born, now based in Taiwan, filmmaker who has done very well. One of the second person from Taiwan who has won the Golden Lion in Venice Film Festival. And of course, from Singapore, Philip Chia, who was for a long time the programmer and curator, festival director of Singapore International Film Festival. We talk about films, we watch films. There were films that they were talking about, independent Asian films that they talk about that I have not seen before. I asked them, how can I watch these films that you're talking about? And they told me that, sadly, there are no DVDs around of these films. And you probably would not be able to see these films after the festival. And that got me thinking, these are great works made from Asia, and often, it was made with a lot of hard work, tears, money. But yet, after a film festival, after a screening, we don't see them anymore. I asked, how are these films preserved? They say, after a screening in a festival, probably in the cupboards below the beds, and it was just left to rot. I feel that it was such a pity. There was so much works that was created, and yet they are not preserved properly. These are works done by people who have gone to international festivals, who were celebrated, for their talents, for the kind of films and stories that they're telling, and yet these are the films after a few years from the festival circuit. I asked, are there any ways to preserve them properly? Are there any ways to make these films more accessible to a wider public? And that was when, after my India backpacking trip, I came back. It was something that I just couldn't keep thinking about. I talked to a lot of people, filmmakers, programmers, people who are in this industry. Can we do something about it? So after a few months, on the first day of 2005, we set up an organization, a non-profit, non-governmental organization called the Asian Film Archive. It is an organization that was set up to save, explore, and share the art of Asian cinema. And beyond a repository of films, what we really want to do is to make it a living archive where it contributes to screenings, it contributes to research, it contributes to us understanding why these films are made, who are they made for, what are their relevance and value for the people after a long time. And after 3 years, after 3 years, we have collected almost 1,500 feature films titles, and almost 80% of all the feature films that was ever made, in Singapore that still exists. We have collected them. We have published the first DVDs of short films that were made in Singapore, and that was our means of promoting, getting films to be accessed by more people. We have trained more than 1,000 educators in film literacy, getting them to be multipliers of what we have in the archive, to use these films in their classrooms, to show them in the classrooms for educational purposes, as well as for research work for their students. And our work was recognized internationally by the International Federation of Film Archives, who made us an associate member. We were also appointed and elected as the Secretary General for the Southeast Asia Pacific Audiovisual Archives Association. So these are some of the work that the Asian Film Archive have done within 3 years. It showed us that, and it is not just me alone, it is with a group of people who are as passionate about our film heritage, who are as passionate about preserving this work. And definitely it must mean that these works mean something to them beyond personal pleasures. After 3 years, my idea of archiving also expanded. I started to be interested in films that I'm not archiving. What are some of the films that I'm not archiving because it is lost, because they are banned, and that's why they are not screened, and subsequently, we just lose track of them. Films that are not made, films that have been in preparation, there are scripts. Sometimes it started, but it stopped, but it was never completed. So I become interested in what the archive may never be able to archive. And that got me interested in production. Because I realized that if we are just looking at the end product, the film that was made in the end, we are missing out on a lot of the activities in filmmaking that are not recorded. So that was when I started to talk to people. What and who are people who have been trying to make stuff, and why are they getting stopped? There was a group of filmmakers that particularly interested me. They are making exciting works, short films. They share very similar ideas of cinema as I do. But of course, these are films which are not films that you would see in a 1,000-seater theater, or it is not your Jack Neo kind of films. It is films that are very little. They are films which tell very little stories about people who are not handsome stars that you might recognize on the screen. But yet, they tell the little stories and the little histories which I feel are as important. We try to make them by helping each other to make our films, by using the resources that we have to make them. They are first-time filmmakers without a track record, so it becomes difficult for them to get funding. But we say, but it is important for these films to be made, and let's get them to be made anyway. And this is what John Cassavetti, an independent filmmaker, said. It was the first post on our website of what we believe in. If you're worrying about how to finance and distribute your movies, then you shouldn't bother making movies at all. You make movies because you need to make them. And with that, we've made about 15 feature and short films that has traveled to places like Tokyo, Rotterdam, Buenos Aires, etc. That is our way of contributing to the diversity of films that was made in Singapore, and why these stories means something to us. One of the things which I told the filmmakers as well, is when we are doing this, let's try a different mode of production. And what do I mean by that? I have seen films that I want to archive, but yet the filmmakers don't own the rights to the films. And that's why, even if the filmmakers are willing to, we are not able to preserve these films properly. So I say, I will come on board as a producer for your films, but with these conditions. I don't want to be paid. If the film made money, I would like you to make a donation to the Asian Film Archive. And I want you to own the rights to the films. And what I mean is not just the copyrights of the films, but I want you to own the film so that when the film is made, it is your film. You know that there is no intervention from producers, from other kind of consideration, and it stays true to your intention of what the film should be. And for me, that is archiving the real spirit of a film, where it is not cut by commercial or by the state. Beyond making films, we started to make an initiative called the 13 Little Pictures Film Lab. And this is where we try not just to screen our films, but to have forums and platforms where we are able to exchange films and ideas with fellow filmmakers, and especially budding filmmakers who have made stuff but who have not yet made their first feature film. Because we feel that we want critical dialogue and discourses about the films that we are making. More importantly, a lot of people might say, these are films which are so small, it is art house films. Is there an audience for them? What justify you to put in so much time and resources in them? And my answer to them is, of course there's an audience for them. Oftentimes, I think the society view these films as by their box office numbers. But I feel that it is as important for us, if this is a film which we feel it is great, for us to find the audience for them. It might not be immediate in terms of a theatrical release, but let's say over 5 or 10 years, for us to find the audience for them in the classrooms, in Singapore, and abroad. And I think that there is no better time than now to make films in Singapore. Singapore is, in a state of transition. A lot of things are happening, and I think I'm most gratified to find not just young people, but people in general fighting for causes, to preserve the heritage, to fight for animal and migrant workers' rights, to fight for freedom of speech and expression. And I think it is a time where there's so many stories out there in our society. Why is it that movies matter? Beyond entertainment, Brahman Shaw says that entertainment is a kind of service to the people. After the people have worked so hard, it is a service to them to be able to relax. It is a form of communal entertainment for us to come together and remember what are the films that we have seen together and what it means to us. But beyond that, I think it is also, there might be Avengers, there might be The Dark Knight Rises, but only us, Singaporeans, can tell our own stories. Other people would not, be able to tell the stories that we want to tell in our own way. It is not the Singapore story that was commissioned, by an overseas broadcaster, telling stories which are different from perhaps what we feel. So I want to end with an image. So I started with one image of a friend who has passed away, and I want to end with this image, which is a picture of what I've taken together with Professor Jacob Pang, who started the NUS Overseas College Program. It is a program that I'm very privileged to have participated when I was in NUS. And I would always remember Professor Jacob Pang. I was in my final year. I was in the States, and I would like to actually have my final year project done with Stanford, the university that I'm attending courses in. I tried different ways to get it done, and the often reply that I get is, if I allow you to do something, to do this, it would not be fair to the rest of the students. When in an informal occasion, I was sharing with Professor Jacob Pang, what are my plans after I go back, what are my plans now, etc. kind of thing, and he happened to know that I would like to actually do my final year project when I'm abroad. He said, yes, it is not fair, but my job is to make you to give you an unfair advantage. And that was his principle, to cater to not just the overall, to everybody, to all the students, as if they are all the same, but to give individual attention to each student so that they are able to get an unfair advantage from each other. And so with that, it is a coincidence as well that his ex-student, which is who is also a staff of NUS, was actually also spending a sabbatical in Stanford. He got me to go under his supervision. I'm able to do half a year of my final project in Stanford, and when I come back. With Professor Jacob Pang, I see in him the kind of visionary that he's not bogged down, by bureaucracy. He's flexible. He looks out for his students' welfare and opportunities that are available to them. And I think that I always remember him by that. I'm now also teaching, and I only hope that I can be as good a teacher as he is. I also end with this image, because you can see in this that it is not a good image at all. A lot of the films, when I'm with the archive, they are films that are not in a great state. And very quickly, what I realized, after some time, is that yes, we may preserve a film in its best condition, but we must also constantly search, what do these images mean to people? I may not have a perfect image of a picture of myself with my friends, with Professor Jacob Pang today, but he will always be remembered, for what he has done to me. And I think that is even more important than the physical material of what we archive. So with that, thank you very much.
Hi, Bee Thiam.
Hi.
Thank you very much for coming and joining us. Please, have a seat. Every now and then we have a young soul like Bee Thiam joining us. I must say, sitting there watching you, speaking so honestly, with quiet confidence, is refreshing. No big fanfare, but committed to what you're doing in a quiet way. It's very humbling. And I'm sure it is for many of us. And I'd like you to join me in giving him a big hand. There are many of us who have grandiose ideas, but they remain ideas. You thought of something and had sufficient commitment to that belief to go out there and get it done. Of course, there'll be many people out there who can tell you how you could have done it better, but the fact is, you are several notches better than the rest of us because you actually went there and did it. So, what I'd like to find out from you today is, what is it that made you do this? There were sacrifices. You could have done something else in your life, that could have earned you a lot more money, a lot more job security, financial security, and so on. But what made you do this? I don't believe it's because you had no options. What made you do this, and what made you stay on course? There are people who start but drop out because going is tough. So I'm just curious as to what made you take this path that's usually not taken, in Singapore at least, and stay on track.
Well, I feel that I'm not one of the few, but one of the many. In my course of work, I've actually seen a lot of young people as well, and because I'm teaching, I'm so honored to be able to have my students share with me their dreams and what they have done. So I like to think that I'm not the exception. Why is it that I do what I do? I feel that NUS is a big part of it. And I think that a great university education, one of the things that it must give you after 4 years are impulses. Impulses of what you can do, what you want to do, and why you want to do this thing for the society. It is not just thinking about yourself, it is what keeps you obsessed. It is what keeps you thinking about when before you sleep. And I think NUS has given that to me. I'm trained in engineering. A lot of people ask me, like, why am I doing film, instead of engineering? But it is precisely because of the broad-based learning in NUS that allows me to do so. I may be an engineering graduate, I may be trained in engineering, but at the same time, I'm given the opportunity to spend a year in Stanford and Silicon Valley to look at how grassroots organization in California works. They don't rely on government, they rely on communities, to come together to help each other make things happen. I'm given opportunities in NUS to explore filmmaking, providing me with resources, lecturers, trainers from external trainers who would, inspire me. And I think that is, why I always feel indebted to NUS for giving me that education. It doesn't train me to be an engineer. It trains me to contribute to the society, to think about the world outside, of myself.
I guess it also drives home the point that you don't need to be formally trained in filmmaking to make a film, right? And it's very obvious these days. And we tend to compartmentalize abilities and confuse it with skills. What you need is a story to tell. And what you said at the end about that photograph is very poignant. It's not the best photograph from a technical point of view, but it can still be a very powerful photograph if you understand the context. Some of the finest pictures we have all seen and that have had an impact on us are technically seriously flawed. Yes? But understanding the context has given us tremendous insights on the strength of the human spirit, for example. I think that's what you are trying to capture here. And what came through in your presentation also is, you didn't say it, but the word authenticity. You inferred that when you said, only we can tell our own story. Right? I would add something to it. Only we can tell our own story, said and captured at the right time. Isn't it? Many of us benefited from having watched visuals, archived visuals, of what happened in the 1960s, 70s, and so on. And it allowed us to develop empathy. And that's what helps us become a people. You don't have to live that era, live in that era, but you can live that era. Isn't that what you're trying to say?
Yes.
I mean, the whole point about something that is captured by us, about us, and retained. Not with technical perfection. In fact, the imperfection is what is appealing.
Yes.
Would you want to comment on that?
I think I especially like little films, little photographs, pictures, films which might not mean to perhaps 1 million people who have seen the film on a big screen, but yet it means something to us. I think one of the most moving short films I've seen from Singapore, it is a collection from Charles Ong, who is an amateur filmmaker in the 60s. And all the footages, what it is, it's footages of his son when it is 5 years old, 6 years old, 7 years old, every year during their birthdays. And it is one of the most moving images that I've seen from Singapore. Silent, without anything, but just silent 16mm footages, home movies. I don't know him personally, but yet what was captured was family, home, kinship. And I think that is so important. I think especially with the technology today, everybody can make their own films. They can record their own family histories. And I think that is the most precious.
Would you say that more than any other period in Singapore's history, today, archiving memories through visuals is especially critical? And if so, why?
Yes, because I mean, Singapore is moving so fast. A lot of the things that we have are already lost. And I think which is why I think we're experiencing what we call an archive fever, where people are having compulsive, almost compulsive desire to want to archive things. It is as if, you know, when you watch something, you save it, even if you don't see it again, ever. But just owning that piece of image, you know, it is a comfort for you, that it is still with you. When your playground is no longer there, you know, when your primary school is no longer there, you know, what is left for us, it feels almost as if a part of us is gone. And I think, which is why we are holding on to those images, which is why, you know, I have in my class, students always taking pictures with their friends. And I think one of the interesting things is also, you realize that when people take pictures of each other, they're always smiling. You never see people, you know, like crying. I'm crying, I'm going to take a picture. Whenever I'm taking a picture, it's always smiling. And that is because we want to capture a part of that happiness, that happy moment, that happy memories for us, for our friends, for people who matter to us.
I think one of the things you said much earlier when we were chatting is you lament the lack of organized means of archiving. What I understood by that is, yes, each one of us as individuals is doing our own archive, right? Family, individuals, we're doing it. But as a collective, there's not enough of resources being put to make sure that we are archiving moments that become tomorrow's history, right?
Yes and no. I think definitely the government can play a bigger role in terms of funding, in terms of organization. But I think what is very important as well, I mean, there is a National Archive of Singapore, which works very closely with the Asian Film Archive. But you should not also leave it to just the state to be doing this work. Because what is most important in archiving is archiving itself. It is not that these films are saved. It is people actively archiving this work. Because when they do that, you know that this means something for them. And I think that is more important than relegating all this work to the state and knowing that the state would take care of it.
No, that's not what I meant. Don't get me wrong. Okay. I'm not saying that the state has to do it. I'm saying some form of an organized manner in which all these disparate ideas actually can come together.
Like the Singapore Memory Project?
Well, it could be that, but not necessarily that. I mean, I'll give you an example. You know, some time back, I was wondering whether we should have a series of documentaries capturing the social history of Singapore as opposed to a historian's history. A historian looks at history as a historian, you know, from an academic point of view. But social history, I mean, it triggered my mind when I saw a series of documentaries produced in Canada on the social history of the Canadian people. And it's basically a collection of different perspectives of moments, critical moments in history, right? I mean, if you look at our history, we've had critical moments, right? For example, the riots of '64. For example, separation. The historian would look at it as a historian, but it's unlikely that you'll have consensus among all Singaporeans about how we all felt in '65 when we became independent. Some may have celebrated firing crackers. Others may have had tremendous anxiety for different reasons. But the historian doesn't necessarily capture that spectrum of perspectives, but you can have that spectrum of perspectives, but somebody needs to sort of pull those perspectives together so that someone watching it gets something out of it, slightly different. So I'm not saying that everything has to be organized. I'm saying while we have many individual pieces, do you think it's possible for us to have a lot more of this organized stuff? For example, the Canadian documentary series was not sponsored by the government. It was a group of people who came together and said, we will fund this, it's a great idea. Private sector organizations came and put the money and said, let's do it. and gave the producers the autonomy to produce it the way they want. Is that possible?
Possibly. I think it would be good to have, but I think what interests me most is not one overriding narrative, but to have many, and to look at footages, and not just footages. And I give an example. I think one of the most memorable documentaries that I've seen from the region, it's this film called The Last Communist by Amir Muhammad. And he made it a point when he was making the film not to use any archival footage, telling stories, from the present. So what he did was he went from town to town in Malaysia, tracking the path of Chimping, and asked the hotel that he stayed, the house that he was living in and stuff like that, and asking people who are living in those places now, do you remember this person? What are you doing now? Things like that.
Yeah.
And I think that is as important as someone who is putting together every bit of footages that is relevant. For him, he decided against doing it at all. And I think that proves something as well. And it is as important. So I think it is for us to look at archiving, for us to look at history, for us to look at footages, what has been recorded, with as much imagination as possible. And we are seeing that in the richness of the films and documentaries that are made in the region today. Yeah.
Final question before I throw it open to the floor. What do you think would happen to Singapore going forward if we do not have a deeper spirit of archiving? If you take it out of the equation, what's your prognosis?
Well, I've said, in my 10 minutes, more than 10 minutes talk, that I think there is no better time to make films today. And as we make, it is just as important for us to archive, because that producing is archiving. And why is that so? I think former Minister Rajaratnam said it best when he said that a society cannot be without soul. If not, we just have people living almost as if this is a treasure island. We are here because of money, because we are here to make a living, but not to live. And what brings us together? What does it mean to be in this community at this point in time in Singapore? I think it's important for us to record, for us to document, not one narrative, but from anybody who wants to make something, for us to be able to comment on each other on a free platform. And film, amongst all the arts, images, is, I feel, one of the best platforms, because film offers a platform to be able, because film as a fiction with drama, it allows us to carry out those kind of difficult but necessary conversation in a safe environment. And I think that is important, especially for a society that is having so many differences. We have to come together to have this kind of conversation, apart from the national conversation.
And I guess whatever you said now is, what you said now is extremely timely, and it strikes a chord with many of us now that we have just come out of the white paper debate. I think it's thrown up a lot of questions, right, about us being at a point of inflection, about national identity, about what the Singaporean core is, and so on. I mean, what you're talking about, is definitely in sync with those sentiments, many of those sentiments that were articulated in and outside the House of Parliament. With that, I'd like to throw it open to the floor. Questions, comments, and as I say all the time, no speeches. So, yes, can I have the first comment or question, please? Yes. Are you going to the toilet or? Okay. Okay, question. Okay, good. You have to give your name and your IC number. If you're a female, your telephone number as well.
Yeah,
Okay.
but that's only if I'm actually standing close to him. So I'm
Okay, okay. Quite good, huh? Okay.
Hi, Bee Thiam. I'm actually also NOC alumni. By the way, Prof. Teo was actually here, but he had to leave a bit earlier. So actually, what I wanted to ask was, you brought up a little bit about the NOC experience. But many times, whenever people talk about building an entrepreneur, it's always about building a business. You're not running a business, but you're being entrepreneurial. So I'd like to get a sense of, from your perspective, how you are being entrepreneurial, what entrepreneurship means to you as you are archiving a film, preserving a part of history. Why is that entrepreneurial? Because that will help the rest of us realize that entrepreneurship is not about making a lot of money. It's not about making a business, it's about making a difference. So, if you could tell us a little bit more about that.
But you would agree that the two are not necessarily mutually exclusive. I mean, you can make a difference, doesn't mean that you have to be a pauper.
Yes, I would agree that, I'm not going to be making a speech, but I realize that the portrayal of entrepreneurship here in Singapore, especially in NUS, is very commercial. It's very industrial.
Mm-hmm.
It shouldn't be like that. Would you agree?
Okay.
Of course. I think one of the things which I realized very early on is I'm not good with getting people to give money to me. So I decided that I'm not a for-profit kind of person. I prefer for people to give money to a cause which I would like to champion. So actually one of the things which I do is I look at a lot of non-profit organizations. I look at non-profit organizations, how do they start? How do they start? What keeps them alive? And one of the most important book I think that I've read is Built to Last. Especially for an archive where we are holding on materials, we want these works to outlast us. We want these films to last for 50, 100 years and more. How do I start an organization, a non-profit organization, that is able to last for 50, 100 years? So I look at what are some of the organizations that have last for that long, what makes them tick, and I try to apply it to what I'm doing. So I think when I say that NUS offer me a broad-based education, I think it gives that kind of training to me. And most importantly, it gives me a mindset that I can make a difference, and this is how it can have practical effect to what I'm doing. It is not just inspiring, it is showing me how. It is not just showing me how, but telling me that I can do it.
Do you have enough money to have 3 meals a day?
Thankfully.
Okay. No, I guess it begs the question, how do you survive? I think you need a balance, come on. You can't, at some point, you do need to be practical. I mean, so while I appreciate everything that you're saying, it cannot be all altruistic, right? There has to be some form of commercial imperative involved because you need to survive. Even at a basic level, you do. So the question is, how do you strike a balance between the two? It doesn't have to be 50-50, but the point is, how do you make sure that while you're pursuing this, you also take care of your basic needs, survival needs?
Well, I have a business plan for the archive.
That's for the archives.
Yeah, so
but
I think
how much
I look at how do we make ourselves sustainable? How can we employ people to be doing full-time work? I'm not the first person that I employ, but subsequently I was, and I think that's what I do. Only with funding can we make work sustain. Mm-hmm. And I think some people call it begging. I call it asking. How do I convince people the cause that we are championing is worth their time, their money, and their name, their association?
Okay.
And
and you pay yourself a salary, and you pay everyone a salary, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Question is, how do you go about getting people to part with money on a cause such as yours?
Well, just like any other cause. I show them what is the value of what we do. Why is it that we need full-timers to do so, apart from volunteers. Yeah, I I don't know how to answer you. Yeah.
It's a very straightforward question. I don't understand why you can't answer it.
Yeah.
Okay, you've got something that involves cost that has to be paid for, right?
Mm-hmm.
Am I right?
Yeah.
All these things are not going to be for free.
Yeah.
You got to pay salaries, you got to pay for rent, you got to pay for the actual work, right?
Mm-hmm.
Somebody's got to pay for it. And you're
Yeah.
saying it need not be all government.
It
Government
may not
could
be- yeah.
pay part of it, dollar for dollar or whatever it is, but you also want for it to be sustainable, you need a source of funds that's sustainable. Question is, are there enough sources of funds other than government?
Okay.
Number two, how receptive are they to your idea? And I sense that many of them may still consider what you are doing rather esoteric,
Okay.
right? So that's what we're driving at.
Okay, let me try to answer.
I'm an engineer. So I try to break it down. These are the costs to run our programs. And what is it that we need? Is this amount? I come up with a way. Okay, so say for example, if we need $100,000 to run that program, how can I make it sustainable in the long run? Perhaps I can persuade the government to give me 30% of my budget. But I don't want the government to fund 90, if not 99% of what I do, because if one day they switch off the tap, it means I have to close down.
Fair.
So 30% of it comes from commercial entities who recognize the value of our work in the long run, to nurture audience, to build and educate audiences, and they find value in that. And
so obviously they're not putting in the money seeking commercial returns on investment, right?
Yeah.
But what is the return for them?
I think we are especially grateful to have enlightened sponsors who are not looking for just putting their sponsorship logo onto a banner on the website, but they see it as a long time. If, say for example, production companies, if the archive doesn't exist, where do I park my films? For cinema chains, I cannot be just showing The Avengers, A Boys to Men. Who is going to go and watch my films that I bring in that's been winning festivals, and be able to see the context of it, in the history of cinema. So I think we have enlightened sponsors who does that.
Okay.
And the last 30% of it, comes from income. So when we conduct courses for teachers, for schools, when we sell DVDs, a portion of those proceeds goes back to the archive to fund its mission. So we do it that way, right? So that I think in the long run, we hope that the archive will survive.
So just to understand you correctly, what you're saying is that your driving force is not making money, your driving force is making a difference, but along the way, all your bills are taken care of.
Yeah.
Your business plan ensures that. And so far, you've not had any serious challenges doing that.
Well, it is always challenging.
Serious challenges.
Yeah, it is always challenging, and I say it honestly. And we are really fortunate to have people who come forward to help us. Yeah.
Okay. Next comment or question. Yes, we'll come to you after that. Well.
Thank you, Mr. Tan. I'm Jabin.
Could you bring the mic closer to your mouth,
Okay.
please? Thank you.
Jabin from NUS Engineering. Okay, my question is, as we all believe, movie matters. I believe it is important for NUS to have student movies. So, okay, here's the multiple choice question. What do you think will encourage NUS students most? 5,000 film award, which encourage students to make films and go for the film award. B, free equipments for students to use, such as those $10,000, $100,000 cameras and the lights and the audio recorders. And C, very friendly filmmaking community. D, none of the above, of course, not. E, others, please specify.
What about all of the above? No? Okay.
Well, I would go for E, none of others. I feel that if you want to make a film, you should make it. If there's no, you shouldn't make a film because of prizes, because of competition. That is one. You shouldn't make a film because equipments are available. Even if equipments are not available, I think you should find your means to make it, even with your own iPhone or something. No one can stop you from making the films that you want to make and to distribute it with today's technology. C is friendly student committees.
Yes.
Even if the student committees are not friendly, go make the films yourself. You do not have to rely on anyone.
Okay. Do you think it is required or it is important for NUS to have a very good film committee which may have produced or may be able to produce films that can earn film festival awards? Do you think it is important for NUS to have such kind of community?
For me, I feel that awards and prizes are good as recognition, but they are really not, and they should not be the motivation. Why would we send a film to a festival, and if it wins an award, what does it mean? It means that, for me, it means that more people would know the film and want to come and watch it. And that is really why, I would even submit it to a festival. And I believe that when we make something, obviously we know who we made it for. It might be for your family, it might be for your girlfriend, your boyfriend, it might be for your friends in NUS. Make them for these people.
Okay.
I make Cyrus for a friend who will not live in who will not live for more than a few years.
Okay.
And that is the only reason why I will make it.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Tan. I believe you have a strong heart which you get recognized by yourself, but maybe sometimes do you think NUS need to be recognized as a university which produces good films, like those other universities which have their own film communities, which is good? Okay, that's my last.
Okay. That said, I feel that it is perhaps time for NUS to consider having a film program, an official film program, a formal film program in a university. Already, the university has produced a lot of illustrious filmmakers. There is Calvin Tong, there is Sherman Ong, and their films have went to festivals, they have won accolades from overseas, their films were on the big screen. There are also other filmmakers out there. My producer, for example, for my first short film, she is now an award-winning filmmaker and cinematographer based in New York. So if we have such a big group of NUS alumni who has been doing so well in the industry, there is clearly an interest. New Studio is still around after 10 years. There's clearly interest from the students. There are faculty who have been pursuing research in this area, film studies, I think not just in arts and social science, but I think even in faculty of School of Architecture. So I think clearly there's interest from faculty, student, alumni. Why not consolidate these resources and have a formal program?
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. On that score, do you really need a formal program? I mean, you were talking about not necessarily formalizing everything. I think if you have sufficient buzz and interest groups, people who are like-minded coming together, who have got a passion for it, alumni, as well as current student body coming together, forming an interest group, wouldn't you think that that would be a stronger catalyst for inspiring pieces to surface, to emerge, instead of formalizing it through a program? And why do we need to formalize and have a program all the time? Why can't it be student initiative? A group of students coming together, some fine works are produced that way, right? People coming together with a common cause and say, let's just pool resources, get some other people to put in money and get it done. Where has all that spontaneity gone? Why do we need to structure things?
Well, I think if, for such a long time, there is interest from the ground, clearly there's interest and there's impetus, for the school to look at doing something more, to provide perhaps more resources and support, right, for the students and for the staff. I think with a formal program, there can be resources that are put into this program that would otherwise not happen. It allows, I think, faculty to be able to pursue filmmaking, film studies, as a legitimate research area that is not discounted for. It is not, oh, I'm doing, say, for example, political science, but I'm also interested in film, but I can't do film, so I have to park it under something else, for example. And I think clearly there is enough interest, from the community to warrant, perhaps, for the management to look at something like that. And not to say that, when that happened, the student groups, and other kind of activities stop. Because I think that is the richness and vibrancy, of the community. To not only have films made, to not only have films explored, researched, discussed critically, but to have films from elsewhere being shown. We have seen great university campuses hosting repertory theaters, showing films from not just your own country, but from elsewhere. And we have seen, we have seen that in Harvard, we have seen that in UCLA, we have seen that in Berkeley. We have not had it in NUS. And I think perhaps it's time for us to look at, allocating such resources to, I think, increase the kind of activities, to tap onto the potential, for synergy to come together, for that to be synergy across different faculties, across different interest groups, to consolidate such resources, so that I think we can really thrive in this area.
Right. Thank you. Yes. Introduce yourself, well.
Testing. Hi. Hi everybody, my name is Valerie and I'm the online chat moderator here tonight. So while everything was going on stage, I was just looking at the chat and seeing if there are any questions for Bee Thiam. So I've got a question here that's kind of related to the first question tonight about entrepreneurial spirit. So it's kind of it's directed at you, it's a personal question. And he asks, from your early work with the NUS Overseas College to starting the film archive and then 13 Little Pictures, you definitely show a very strong entrepreneurial streak. How does this come about? And any advice for a student thinking about going down the same path? So any experiences from NUS or before that led to this entrepreneurial streak? Oh, and this question comes from a username LG Lab.
Thank you. It's very hard for me to talk about myself because I never saw myself having an entrepreneurial streak. I just do things that I believe. I just do things that I cannot let go. And I pursue them, with what I feel, I can do. I think I'm fortunate to grow up, in an environment where my family always challenges, me and my sibling to contribute back to the society, and to feel that, and to feel unafraid, to ask for help, and I think one of the things which I really like is to backpack. When I backpack, I try not to plan. I try to just buy the ticket and go with a map. And for me to have the opportunity to meet strangers. That allows me to be independent. It allows me to stand on my own feet, to survive. And I think it is important for us to have that survival instinct. Once you sharpen that up, I think all entrepreneurs are good backpackers. And in the same light, backpackers, people who like to travel, they make very good entrepreneurs because they go to places which are foreign to them and they explore and they discover. So I think taking that risk, I think is part of what I grew up with. My father gave me a lot of freedom. When I stayed at home to do my work, he would ask me to go out of the house and not stay at home. So that was how I learned to survive on the streets. Yeah. Hope that answered the question.
Okay. I think that's a lovely way to end the discussion. I'd like to go back to the first question, you know, about entrepreneurship, balancing the need to look at your top line or bottom line, and balancing that with your fervor, what drives you, you know. And I think at the end of the day, you know, we have to ask ourselves, what are we as a university? You know, what are we producing? What do we seek to produce? And this is an ongoing discussion, right? I remember having a conversation with Professor Tan Chuan last year, and we were talking about what is it that NUS should aspire to produce? What kind of individuals, you know, and what kind of an image? And at the end of the day, at the end of the conversation, we agreed on one thing, that we should not just be known to produce your big names. You know your big names? People who become ministers, people who become Fortune 500 list entrepreneurs. You know the people who make the big headlines in the big papers? We should also produce individuals who shape and influence beliefs that are important for society in niche areas. And one should not be more important than the other. I think that's the mark of a matured institution where we don't differentiate. And I think the fact that we have produced individuals like this demonstrates that we are on track for that. And I hope we will not lose sight of that of that. I'd like you to join me in thanking Bee Thiam from all of us. Right? We are very fortunate that we still have individuals such as you in Singapore, and I hope you're not a dying breed.
Thank you.
Thank you
for having me.
Thank you very much. Thank you. We've got something for you. Right? Here's a picture of the two of us. One of us is better looking than the other.
Of course, that's you.
Give him a big hand, please. Okay. Posing a photograph, okay. I thought we want to be spontaneous. No? and we need you to do something else. Okay. Here, we need you to say something nice about us. While he's doing that, I just want to tell you next month we are having as a speaker Mr. Ravi Menon, who is the Managing Director of the Monetary Authority of Singapore. Right? So you may want to come, and he's talking about something that's quite far from what he does for a living. He's going to talk about happiness. But it's very relevant if you look at the white paper. If you know what I mean. So if you want to ask him some of those questions, make sure you come. You want to read this out?
Thanks for having me. Thank you, NUS. Thanks for keeping me alive.
Wow, that's good. Thank you.